Being great with money is a lot like being great at poker. You can't always read what kind of hand a great gambler has. And you can't always read what kind of wealth someone has either. Great gamblers don't want you to know what hand they are working with, and they do their best to throw you off. The same applies to people with money. You have no idea who has money. Wealth often looks quiet and calculated. On the opposite side of the equation, if in poker you showed every one of your cards to everyone, bragged about what cards you had, you'd likely be awful at poker and probably never win. You'd probably not make many friends either if you lived your life and played poker that way. The same thing can be said about broke people with their finances. They're willing to show you their entire hand to show off and demonstrating it's okay to take advantage of me. While wealthy is quiet, broke often looks loud and flashy. In real life, change the word hand to wallet, and it's pretty clear that we shouldn't walk around showing what's in our wallet to everyone. I'm going to reveal both the pros and cons of looking poor, determine if you look poor enough, and the unfair advantage it will give you and even your kids in life by doing so. I remember once collecting a check for nearly $250,000 for a custom home theater project. That was just the down payment for what would be around $1 million project. The customer purchased several homes in one of the richest zip codes in the United States. He planned to tear down all of the homes around him, all his neighbors' home, and build his dream mansion. This thing was massive. The craziest part of this interaction for me was when we actually met at his home. He was wearing mesh shorts, and you would have never known he was incredibly wealthy. In fact, every one of the biggest jobs I've ever seen being in sales were the most normal-looking people you'd ever imagine. Many times, salespeople would walk right by them, unassuming that this could be a millionaire or, even a billionaire standing in front of them. Just assuming because they look normal, they don't have money. Some of the wealthiest people you will ever encounter in your life, and I mean true wealth, they generally wear nothing flashy, unassuming, mainly because they don't need to impress you, me, or anyone else for that matter. Wealth is quiet. However, some of the flashiest people were the toughest to deal with in sales, and honestly, some of the biggest pains in the ass out there. Especially when it came to nickel and diming what they were spending and honing in on details that didn't matter because, they just looked rich, but they were actually broke. I remember once selling a television to someone driving a $100,000 BMW. This person needed to use 7 different credit cards to pay for that sale, but yet they drove a $100,000 BMW. In 20 years of being in sales, I assure you, the unassuming wealthy people were always given far more fair quotes because they were never showing their hand of how wealthy they were. However, someone wearing fancy shoes, pulling up in their fancy cars, always had the salespeople chomping at the bit to help them and oversell them. About 6 years ago, my wife and I got ignored at a BMW dealership. Why? Well, we had jeans and a t-shirt on and looking at BMWs. There were about 3 to 4 buying groups that day that appeared to look richer than us. In fact, several of them arrived after us and were helped before us. They were looking at the entry-level cars, basically the 3 Series and the 2 Series BMWs, and there was no shortage of help all of them could get. Us, on the other hand, were left alone for what seemed like the entire night looking at pricier SUVs. Finally, frustrated after what seemed like all night, we walked into the dealership to finally ask questions because despite looking at the most expensive cars on the lot, no one, I guess, thought we were serious. We met Kelly. Kelly was a very nice young woman who worked with internet sales. She offered to show us the car until one of the salespeople freed up. At this point, though, we had a bad taste on how we were ignored, so we just asked Kelly if she would get a commission if we bought something. She said yes, and after that, we basically said, we'll take it. We knew exactly what we wanted. We just wanted someone to listen to us for who we were. Kelly barely knew how to process the sale, but we remember seeing the jealous salespeople by themselves, looking both irritated, jealous, and confused that Kelly was the only person who sold a car that night, and it happened to be double the price tag of the other cars that everyone was looking at. But the key was Kelly treated us fairly. Kelly was the only one to earn a commission that night. One pro on looking poor is you will have an opportunity to not be preyed upon as much. We are not as targeted as those that dress fancier than us, even though potentially we make more than them. We fly more under the radar. You also likely not to be oversold to, which can be a con, which I'll get to in a second. If you haven't yet, consider liking the video to help spread the word to other people, and consider subscribing to hear more stories of my journey with money and how I got out of the rat race. Do you have anything better? Will be a common question you need to ask if you look poor. One thing we don't sacrifice on is sleep in bed. We wanted the most comfortable and supportive memory foam beds you can get your hands on, and even asked to see the best they had. The salesperson in the mattress store once brought us to their best selling model. We haven't owned a memory foam bed before, but we read lots of intriguing reviews. It was comfortable, the one he showed us, but we assumed maybe the technology might not be as good as what we expected based on all the hype and reviews. We asked about the delivery dates and time frame on the one we were shown because it was good, it just didn't blow us away. I began to look around while the salesman looked up the availability. I came across a much more expensive one than the one we were looking at. I laid on it and was like, yep, this is the one. I then called my wife over, she laid down on it and agreed, yep, this is the one. This is the one we were reading about and thought we were getting. We ended up going with that more expensive one that I found on my own. We never to this day really got an answer on why we weren't shown that one, but we knew why. We looked common, so rather than answer our question, what's the best you have, he showed us what's the best I think you can afford. This happens all the time, and it's definitely a con. So one con of looking poor is you will need to be your own salesperson, because salespeople are wired to sell you what they think they can close rather than answer your question on what's best for you. I recall in school, growing up as a kid, some of the most popular kids had the hottest basketball player's jersey and the newest shoes. Honestly, I wanted to be friends and hang out with them. Clearly their family was rich and I wanted to be around it. I remember once getting dropped off at one of those kids' houses. And you get inside the house and you realize this kid is sharing a bedroom with two siblings. He had the hottest shoes, but he didn't have any privacy. At a young age, you can't process what that all means. But to me, having the newest stuff meant you were rich. But looking back now, I realize what a bad narrative that was teaching those kids that I wanted to be friends with. My friends would have zero privacy in their bedrooms, but they had the latest Jordans. I want our daughter to learn to not be defined by stuff. And we don't want her to feel chasing labels or trends leads to being more popular. We want to do our absolute best as parents to set her up to be financially literate as much as we possibly can. I know it's easier said than done with marketing and keeping up with the Joneses and popularity, but leading your kids by example about being wealthy or just trying to look wealthy is more likely to set up our kids' future around better habits around finances. So how do you know if you look poor enough? Last year, the average American spent $1,440 on clothing and shoes. Typically, if you were spending in that in a year, you should be in pretty good shape. So if you were to set a budget of, let's say, $1,400 a year and maximize in the whole year, you'd quickly realize branded stuff doesn't go very far. Designer sneakers and shoes can quickly add up. If you avoid most labels and don't look like you're sponsored by those brands, you will fly under the radar. For me personally, we purchase the majority of our clothes from Costco and usually spend a bit more on our sneakers because we are both very active in fitness, my wife and I. You don't have to look like you're homeless. You just want to live your life like those elite poker players. You have no idea what hand they have, and you want people to have no idea what's in your wallet. Check out this video right here where I go into details on the moment I realized I was broke from trying to look rich, and I'll see you on the next video.